choosing to homeschool is tough, and I was questioning everything. I was, I needed it explained to me. Often, I think if you can explain why you're doing something, it can help a child understand why they're expected to do it. Because I don't want to do anything extra work that isn't going to actually help me. Once you're taught in this different way, and you understand where your weaknesses lie, then you start to believe in yourself again.
I'm Nicole Holcomb, attorney by day and podcaster by night, a former educator, school counselor, and administrator, and mom to a 9-year-old daughter with dyslexia, who loves all things Harry Potter, Minecraft, and science. A few years ago, she was identified with dyslexia, and our life seemed to turn upside down for a while, quite literally. I created the Dyslexia Mom Life podcast to help you navigate the upside down journey of dyslexia. You got this. If you're wanting to thrive as a mom in this dyslexia journey, then you're in the right place. Let's get started. You are listening to episode 21 of the Dyslexia Mom Life podcast. Today, I'm honored to have Mike Jones on the show. Before we get started, though, I have a question for you. Have you seen the short film Michael yet? And that's Mical. If not, I recommend that you watch it and then listen to this episode again. It's less than 20 minutes long, and you can find it on YouTube. You can find it on the Nessie website, and there's some other sites as well that I will link to. Michael is about a 7-year-old boy who is struggling to make sense of why he can't learn to read. He has very high levels of frustration. He is moved from school to school. And eventually, Mike is diagnosed with dyslexia. But yet the teachers still struggle to figure out ways to help him learn. And his mother decides that she is going to take matters into her own hands. She's going to learn everything that she can learn about dyslexia, and she herself decides that she will homeschool him and teach him. She taught Mike how to read by using games and repetition, things that she created herself. Today, you're going to hear Mike's story directly from Mike and how his mom made a difference in his life. My hope is that his mom's journey is an inspiration to every mom who is listening right now. I want you to go watch the movie, though, also, because you're going to learn so much more about Pat and her journey as a mom. Today, though, Mike is going to share his journey, how his mom's inspiration impacted him as an adult. So sit back and enjoy the conversation that I have today with Mike. I do want to say a special thanks to Mike Jones for being on the show, and I do appreciate everything that he's going to share with you today, because you are going to walk away with a different understanding and appreciation, I would bet, about dyslexia, and hearing directly from someone who has gone through that journey and shared that journey with you. I think you're going to find this to be an incredible conversation. All right, today on the show, I am delighted and honored to have Mike Jones with us today. And I have already shared a good bit about you in the intro, Mike. And so we're just going to jump right in today. Thank you again so much for being with us today.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It's very nice to meet you.
It's very nice to meet you. Do you mind sharing a little bit about your background? You know, it is Dyslexia Awareness Month, and I'm so excited and delighted to have some very special guests this month, and for you to be one of my first. And so I appreciate that. But for those that don't know you yet, I'd love for them to hear a little bit about you.
Well, I have dyslexia, and it took me many years to admit that, really, and not feel ashamed of my dyslexia. Now, when I was at school, I just couldn't learn anything. I couldn't spell my own name. I couldn't read anything. Any spellings I was given, I just got them all wrong, even though I was copying from my friend. I couldn't even copy them right. And then we'd have to read out the scores, and I always got 0, and everyone would laugh at me. It was very humiliating, and I hated school. And I was very lucky that my mom, she learned how to help me, and she homeschooled me, and that completely turned my life around. And now I run an ed tech company that produces resources for people with dyslexia. I'm a director of the British Dyslexia Association, which I run with my mom, although she's retired now.
Mhm.
And I'm the CEO and founder of Nessie Learning. And I've authored lots of different programs. There was a study skills program. The biggest one is Nessie Reading and Spelling, which is for younger children. I've authored about 7 or 8 programs.
Wonderful. Yeah, and I'm very familiar with Nessie. It's amazing resources on there. And I've also noticed for Dyslexia Awareness Month, you're actually pushing out some things for families as well, as far as, some free offers for your apps and things like that. So I appreciate that as well. That's very helpful. I know, though, your background also is you went a little different direction when you first started off, I believe, as far as your education after high school. So what brought you back to the world of dyslexia? I believe you went to law school. Is that right?
Yes, that is right. Well, when I was after I was home tutored by my mom in a way that I could learn, it just completely transformed my life. And I was able to read and I was able to write. Okay, so I was much slower than other people. I had to reread stuff lots of times to get it in. I had trouble writing down all my thoughts in a sequence. There were all those sort of issues. But once I'd got past that hump, if you like, and I'd learned that I could learn, then when I went back into school, I went from being the very bottom of the class to the top. And I didn't really look back. However, lots of teachers in that school still thought of me as not capable. So, for instance, my principal, as I was leaving high school, said, "Well, what are you going to do now?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to art college," but I had also considered law. And he said, "Oh, good job, you didn't go for law. I mean, you're just not smart enough to do that." And that kind of stuck with me. And I was at art college, and I was getting on okay, but I was thinking, it just stuck with me. I'm not smart enough to do law, hey? So I transferred, and I transferred to a law college, and after 3 years, and it was tough. I mean, the books were enormously thick and little tiny print, and I'd start reading it, and I'd get a third of the way down, and I'd just completely forgotten what I've just read. And there were lots of embarrassing things, like in the law library, the teacher said, "Oh, well, I want you to go and look up this case. It's, I don't know, King versus someone or other. It's 3 aisles down, 6 shelves up, and then see if you can find it in chapter 10. And a whole list of sequence of instructions like that. I knew I wasn't going to remember them, so I just tried to remember the first thing, and I said it over and over in my head and tried to blank out the rest of it. All the other students just go running off to look for it, and there's me just having to ask again and again continuously, and it made me feel stupid, and I'm sure that made them think I was stupid as well. So there were lots of things. It was tough, but I did well because I was quite good at analyzing and arguing. And so, at the end of it, they asked me to stay on and lecture, but it didn't. I instead went to work for a voluntary organization giving free legal advice to people that were in trouble. And my mom had, in the meantime, set up Bristol Dyslexia Centre. And I was supposed to go on to train in London to be what's called a barrister, like an attorney that stands up in the court. And I went back to help answer the telephone over the summer. And I was listening to parents tell me, and they were at their wits' end. They didn't know what to do. They were in tears. And it brought it all back to me. And I realized that I didn't want to do law. I wanted to help children that had been through what I went through. So I retrained as a dyslexia specialist teacher. And then I started working at that dyslexia centre, and I worked there for 10 years before founding Nessie. But the things that Pat had done with that centre were amazing. And lots of the strategies, the ideas that she'd come up with, card games. And I thought, wow, this is crazy. only a few hundred kids in the local city are benefiting from this, but it could be online, and people around the world could get it. So that's why I started it in my classroom, actually, on a Friday afternoon, and it just grew organically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. And too, I have many parents, and especially I work directly with moms. Lots of them contact me about what can I do, and I'm so thankful that you and your mom both agree to do the Michael film, because I feel like it really gives people an opportunity to see things that they may be experiencing but not comfortable to share, if that makes sense.
Oh,
And
it
so
does, yeah.
I know I've watched some of your other interviews, and I know it was, pieces of that were difficult to maybe talk about publicly, but thank you for doing that. And so it was really an inspiration to me as I work with moms, because there's just so much to the journey, and you want to get it right. You want to help your child. And my daughter's 9. She's in 4th grade, and we found out in 1st grade that she was identified. And we were lucky enough where we live, we were able to get her in a private school where all the children are dyslexic and all the teachers are trained OG. So we're very blessed that way, that we were able to identify early. But, for those that are just still trying to figure this out, can you give some examples? I mean, I know that your mom there were several schools that just weren't working. So she decided, I'm going to do this. I'm going to help Michael through this. Can you give some examples maybe of, how your mom went about doing that? I don't know if you remember all those pieces since it's been a little while, but what are some things now that kind of stick out to you that you feel like really helped you become who you are now, as far as some of the pieces she had in place, really just to reassure moms that it's just day by day, right? Day by day.
Yeah. Well, choosing to homeschool is tough. It's not easy. We had lots of arguments. I remember that. She had, and I was questioning everything. I was going, well, why is it like that? I needed it explained to me. And often, I think if you can explain why you're doing something, it can help a child understand why they're expecting to do it. Because I don't want to do anything extra work that isn't going to actually help me.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think the first thing that's important to do is to find out as much as you can about dyslexia, and then to explain that to your child, because once you have an understanding of why it's been so tough, and not that it's going to be easy from now on, but
right.
there is a solution. And once you're taught in this different way, and you understand where your weaknesses lie, but you can compensate, and so with strategies, then you start to believe in yourself again. And she always taught me through games, and that was really good, because I didn't want it to be like school. School was such a terrible place for me. It was I became a school phobic, really. For years, I couldn't even go back into schools or go anywhere near them. I just felt a cold shiver of dread. But if you're taught through games, then it's fun. The learning becomes engaging, and as long as it remains structured and systematic in small steps, then it works.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, find out about dyslexia, use games, join a community. That's really important, because it can be very lonely. Yes. There are some great strategies that my mum came up with, but sometimes it's best for the child to come up with their own strategy. So I don't know if you know about mnemonic rhymes for helping spelling. So for instance, it spells like it should be spelt W-O-Z, and but it's spelled W-A-S. Well, that doesn't make any sense. So we had a mnemonic, was a sausage. And actually, when I was teaching, there was one of my students came up with that. And I drew a picture of a sausage that had been bitten in half. And as long as it's funny, and you do a picture, you link it to a picture, then little strategies like that can really help it stick in your mind. Mm-hmm. So, she came up with lots of things which are in Nessie now. Syllable, the syllables. A silly bull would beat the ground with his hoof to make the beat of a word. And instead of a prefix, the root and the suffix of a word, it was, because you can't imagine those in your head, she came up with head, body, and tail. And suddenly you can picture those. And when you can picture them in your head, then they stick and they start to make sense. Oh, and so you can have a body with different heads and different tails all swapped out, and it makes it fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
She was very inventive as a teacher.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it does. It seems like if you have pictures, it does help so much because your brain can remember those pieces when they can see it, right? When you can see it in your mind, the word. But for some of those words, like you said, even with was, there's really not a picture, but you were able to create a picture to help kids, and so that's such a key there as well. So circling back to the Michael film, what are some things that you hope people learn from the film?
Well, we wanted to show people how education systems can harm children, really by ignoring teaching them in a different way, in the way they learn. Now, it's up to 15 to 23% or something like that. There's different research, but if we take the Sally Shaywitz research, that's 20% of children. That's a lot of kids in the school, but teachers are not being trained about dyslexia, which is crazy. Now, that's the same story that happened to me is happening to children everywhere now. And since we've made the film, people have been flooding in with stories about how their children are being humiliated at school because the teachers don't understand how to help them. So they're being, for instance, ice cream parties or something like that. These kids never get an ice cream. They only get, if they're lucky, they get a banana or something. I mean, it's just humiliating for them. Or putting up on the wall how many words a kid has learned, and the teacher thinks, well, that's going to motivate them. Well, it may be motivating some of them, but those kids that can't learn are just going to be humiliated and shamed by it. Every day they walk into the class, they see that they're the lowest, and they're never going to get off that low area because they're not being taught in the way they learn. So what we hoped to cope by that, do with the film, we wanted to show parents they're not alone, that this story is happening again and again, but there is a solution. There is hope. You can learn when you have dyslexia if you're taught in the right way. And this solution has been around for hundreds of years. It's crazy. I mean, the Alton-Gillingham methodology has so much research behind it, and yet it's still not part of teacher training. It's a specialist field. It doesn't need to be.
Right. I can remember too, even thinking back when my daughter was in preschool, and I remember they kept her in from recess because she didn't finish some sheet in the classroom, some little worksheet where she was, I guess, coloring something. I don't even remember. And I thought, why? I mean, she was like, she had to have been either 3 or 4 years old. And I can remember the other teachers just shocked. They were like, I can't believe you kept her in for that. And, when I think back to how she struggled even early on, there were signs there, and it's hard to see all those until later when you look back and you start piecing it together. Similar to probably how your mom did in the show, because she was able to kind of put those pieces together and say, because I think the biggest thing for me is I went with my own intuition. I knew when every day she woke up and said, I don't feel good, I can't go to school, I knew I've got to do something different, right? It's not, and at that point we were in first grade. It's just because she, at that point, could look around the classroom, although she, I'm sure, had been, I just didn't realize it, to see the work of the other children. And so she knew, right? She knew something wasn't right. But when we told her she was dyslexic, it was a relief to her. It really was. She's like, okay, well, this makes sense. And, she's very open about it with people, which I think is a blessing. She's very, but it's not easy still. We're still working through the remediation pieces, and she's still, I know in the movie when you were, writing your name, I noticed the other day on her notebook, she still, has some D's and B's in her name, and they're they're not spelled correctly still. And so when I watched the movie, it really did hit home some pieces of a mom's journey. And I know it's your journey as well, but I also think it's important the role that families are playing to recognize. And I think that's part of maybe a benefit we got out of the pandemic, is because people had to go back to their tables, to their kitchen tables, and teach their children from home. At least in the States, we were all sent home to educate. And so we really had to, we had to sit down and we had to become a family and a village and work with our children more than we ever have. And I think that was a blessing, because we also realized we were strong enough to do it.
Yes. Today, a child sent in a poem to Nessie, and it was talking about how, felt like they were a tree, and during the pandemic they'd been away from school, and they felt like they'd grown tall and flourished, and now they were back at school, and they felt like they'd been chopped down. Mm. And that's terrible that a child can feel that way. Mm. We called the film Michael, but I'm a Mike because I couldn't spell my name, even at 9. And I spelled it lots of different ways. It's just one of those difficult ones. But I honestly think that if I hadn't got that help, I would have left school illiterate. And, I was already getting into trouble. I didn't want to go to school. I was getting into fights at school. I was thrown out of 3 different schools because at some point you reach a place where you just can't go any further. And I'm eternally grateful to my mum now. It's tough when you're actually teaching and going through that, but later on, I assure you, they will really appreciate it. And
Right.
They'll look back and they'll think, wow, you were amazing. Thanks, Mom. You saved me.
But right now it's difficult. Yeah. And I know, many people I follow that are adults now that are dyslexic, they say, those school years are just tough. Like there's just no way around it. They're tough years for the student and also for the family. It's just tough years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're constantly being assessed and tested on things that you find really difficult. And what you were saying earlier about your daughter, straight away that you're not getting it as quickly as other kids. Straight away. I was put on the first book of the reading scheme. They all had different colors. I never got past that first book. And everyone was going, well, what color are you on? What book? And I just, I've forgotten. But I never got past book 1. It's just shaming.
Yeah. And at the time we had her in a small private school. So I think there were, I don't know, maybe 10 or 11 students at the time. And at the time I thought, patting myself on the back, we've got her in a small classroom. But then I almost, on the flip side of it, felt bad too, because once I realized what was going on, it was like a spotlight on her, because there were so few kids in the classroom. It was so obvious she was struggling. And I think she felt that early on, and I know that's just sometimes part of it. But at the beginning, I thought, oh, we're doing great things, and looking back, I think we did, because we might not still know if we were in a class of 30, because she wasn't at the point where she was very quiet, she wasn't acting out or bringing attention to herself, and so. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean that she was a very reserved, shy child in the classroom, although she's very vibrant at home. And so, I think it all works out how it's supposed to work out. But, I think too about part of the reason I started the podcast was I do know it's hard, because I'm right there every day in it with parents and with moms. But I also want them to have some hope and some inspiration that we know these years are going to be tough, and we've just got to push through those and help our kids. But what I'd love for you to share is, and you're very honest with that. Yes, it was difficult, but as an adult, you're obviously a very successful adult, right? And I'm not saying that those things didn't affect who you are, But what are some strengths, or and maybe even some people would call them gifts, that you believe now, even sharing about law school and things, what do you believe that actually ended up being a benefit of being dyslexic? A lot of people talk about just being able to imagine things and picture things. And do you believe that there's any part of your amazing brain that's different that you feel like as an adult is a benefit? Just to, give some more inspiration to moms that are.
Yeah. Well, when you're at school, certainly dyslexia doesn't feel like a gift. It feels like a
Right.
curse
Absolutely.
because everything's tougher.
Hmm.
But over time, I've come to realize I've got a brain that thinks a bit differently. And my particular strength is ideas. I just have ideas pop in my head all the time. And I'm so creative. And I play guitar, I write and sing songs. I've done quite a few about dyslexia. I even write short stories for children. I paint. I do all the character voices for Nessie. I make the little hairy characters, a lot of the Yetis. I kind of do all their different voices. I make up tunes for the music songs that we're making. So and I get ideas that just pop into my head, and I can see sort of what's likely to happen as well. So these are all benefits I feel that I've got no proof, but it feels like it flows from my dyslexia. The downside is, putting stuff down, forgetting where I've put it, memory, forgetting appointments. But technology can really help with that sort of thing. I take photos of where I've parked my car so I don't forget where it is.
Do that too.
Yeah,
Yes.
just things like that. I mean, you can take photos of stuff to remember it. You put them in calendars, or you just speak to your phone and make messages. It's great. I mean, all technology can really help with that side of things. But for me, I think it's particularly ideas, creativity. But some children, we ran a campaign where we asked children to send in what they thought, what they were really good at, and it was amazing. Some fantastic just kids with dyslexia who have learned determination, and they are so determined that when they find something they are good at, they absolutely excel. So they've been dancers, they've been artists, they've been just people starting their own businesses, just so many things that they were fantastic at. But the very worst thing schools can do is then take that away from them, saying, "Oh no, you need more reading and writing because more of what didn't work the first time." Yeah, so
Right.
take away what you're brilliant at and give you more of this terrible, horrible reading and writing stuff. Actually, you don't need that much reading and writing. Just a little bit every day, taught in the right way, is more effective than just loads of it that's going to exhaust you.
Right. Yes.
So, there are many different dyslexics out there with super talents, but sometimes it's not obvious. And not everyone's a super genius. Many dyslexics are just normal people, but maybe what their gift is being kind, or being just a good person, or maybe they're really good at talking, or just good with people. There are so many different skills. Sometimes it's not obvious what you're going to be good at, but often when you leave school, it can really start to show.
So, do you think that's important for parents as far as trying to find that balance? Because school is so taxing and so exhausting, to find that outlet, whether it's, soccer or creative writing or painting. Do you believe even while children are in school, it's important for us to also make time for pieces that, light our children up and that they excel in so they have that success?
Definitely. It's so important. You just need something for your self-esteem that, for instance, when I'm talking and listening, I do find it exhausting. It just wears me out. I suppose reading and writing, but I have to pace around normally, and I have to doodle. There's something in me which makes me have to do stuff. And lots of kids are made to sit still. No, sit still because you're not concentrating if you're moving around or shuffling around or looking out the window. No, that's the way my brain works. Often I look out the window. I'm not daydreaming. And maybe I'm just like focused really hard on an idea and letting it just play over in my mind. And it's having an understanding of how someone works, how someone, not everyone is the same, but yeah, being able to get up, go out and do what you're good at is really important, just for your self-esteem, for balancing that sitting down, reading and writing stuff. Everything needs a balance.
Yes, absolutely. All of us need that, don't we? All of us need a balance. It's hard sometimes, but we do definitely. Well, if we can, I want to talk a little bit about Nessie, because it is an amazing resource. And so you talked a little bit about Nessie at the beginning, but can you share with my audience a little bit about the approach to learning that you take in Nessie?
Sure. So our main program is called Nessie Reading and Spelling, and it's very structured. So it's broken down into 100 different sort of lessons. When you go in, there's an assessment, and it sort of places a student just on what they need. So one of the trouble with whole class teaching is you all go along at a similar pace, and if you miss something or you've got holes in your knowledge, it's too bad, that's gone. An individualized approach where you can work at your own pace is ideal. And each section only covers a very few words at a time. And those words, you'd start off with a funny video to learn the sound. Then you start looking at blending the sounds into a word, learning those important decoding skills. And then after you've developed those phonological skills, then you go on to develop whole word reading, rhyming, on-set and rhyme. So it's very, very structured, but all on the same group of words, but just following game after game after game that slowly develops into the fluency next, reading sentences, and then vocabulary and comprehension. So you're covering off the phonics, the phonological skills, the reading fluency, the vocabulary and the comprehension, but just following a very small group of words. And when you do that, you can succeed. And then the next lesson just would build up on the ones you had before. So they're not challenged by words that they haven't been given a lesson, an explanation about how it works. Because English seems like it's a crazy language of lots of bizarre spellings, but actually 90% of it can all be worked out through rules. And once you know that code, how to break that code in, so how you break words into chunks like syllables, like head, body, and tail, how you recognize those, it just unlocks the key. And gradually, as your knowledge increases, wow, you just start speeding up. So Nessie is lots of computer games, also lots of printable resources, card games that Pat made up, and it's been just developed and added to over 20 years. So that would help with reading and spelling. We've got a program for some writing skills, Writing Beach. I'm just about to release a new program that I've been working on for 2 years. It's for 4 to 6 year olds. It's called Hairy Phonological. And it's really developing the important phonological skills, because phonics are important, one of those foundational building skills. But if you don't have the phonological skills to go along with them, just having that phonic knowledge isn't enough on its own. And what I mean by phonological skills is the ability to blend the sounds together, to identify different sounds within a word, how to recognize syllables, how to rhyme. All these are important phonological skills, and they help you work with the chunks, the phonics, the phonic knowledge. So yeah, I'm very excited by that program. It's been a long, hard battle. Nessie's a very small company. We've only got 30 people. We've got offices in Texas and in the UK. But being we've never taken any funding. I mean, we'd put everything to free if we could, but we've got support costs, hosting costs, and things like that.
Right.
And we haven't ever taken any sort of investment or anything like that. So we just grow organically. And it's just run by my wife, Tiffany, and me. We've both got dyslexia. Lots of people with dyslexia work for the company. And we're just passionate about helping children with dyslexia and helping them in the right way. So putting out good resources out there that are low cost, that are affordable, because it's not really anything better than a highly qualified, experienced teacher that knows how to help a kid with dyslexia. But not everyone can afford that. That's pretty expensive. And so if there's technology out there that can disrupt that and give everyone access to it, also there just aren't enough teachers out there either. Just nowhere near enough. Some places it's hundreds of miles to a teacher that's trained. Tiffany's from West Texas, and there it was hundreds of miles for another teacher. So yeah, technology, as long as you've got internet access, will get it to you. But you've got to remember that because teachers are not being trained how to identify and help dyslexia, it's very much being left down to parents. And some parents just can't do it. They might be single parents. Maybe, there's lots of kids that don't have a chance. So those parents that are able to help them, you're saving your children. It's going to be tough. You're going to have to make sacrifices, but sometimes you can be tough on yourself, I know, but actually you're doing an amazing job for your child.
And with the Nessie program and the tools that you have, do you suggest using that? I know you were just talking a little bit about that at the end, but is that something, let's say, I have had parents reach out to me that say, I can't afford the hourly rate of an OG tutor, or I can't afford the private school. Yeah. Could they use Nessie, or would you recommend Nessie with something else, like either trying to find a qualified reading tutor who can also work with your child? What would you say to families that are struggling to figure it out financially?
It's always best to have a good tutor or a teacher if you can. Right. But if it's beyond you, then Nessie, a program like Nessie would be a good way of getting forwards and learning. It's a lot more emphasis on the parent, although the child you can sit the child down and just leave them to it, and in fact don't help them on the assessment, or they'll be placed at a level that's too high for them. but there are lots of card games you can do. Dyslexia goes from mild to really profound, so it depends on the depth of difficulty. Someone with profound dyslexia is definitely going to need a tutor. But for most children, something like Nessie would really help them. I've heard lots of stories from people who Nessie has helped them learn to read, working with their mom. So.
And are you focusing mainly on like early elementary age, or even someone that's let's say 5th or 6th grade that hasn't learned those tools? It seems like Harry and some of the characters may be more geared toward younger children, but really those concepts are universal, right? If you're struggling, if you haven't learned the rules, you haven't learned the rules. So do you find that other, a little bit older middle, or older elementary, 5th, 6th grade into middle school, are they also using your programs as well? Or are you targeting more of younger elementary age, when families are learning that they're struggling early on?
Well, elementary schools where we're focused. In fact, all the research shows that if you can identify and get that help between the ages of 5 and 7, it stops all sorts of later problems developing. So that's really important. So, but that elementary school years, you can get that. That's when you're really learning to read. After that, you're starting to read to learn, and that's a big difference. There's such an amount of strain on children at high school, the amount of work they've got to do, the amount of reading, the amount of writing, that they haven't got really time to do the other stuff. Now, I would like to create a program for older students, adults as well. But I don't know, I tried to do a fundraiser once I did a sort of Shark Tank thing, actually. Online with Richard Branson, and but he didn't give us any money, so we didn't do it. But I'm very much focused on helping the younger children right now. It's
well, I think you're right too. It's as a parent early on, when you see your child struggle, when they come home and either they have those symptoms of I don't feel well, or they're withdrawn, or you see the work they bring home. And so I know one of the resources that you have too, if you could share a little bit about this, is that you do have a screener on your website. So you do have some resources, although you also acknowledge that you may have to go and pay for an assessment. But here are some pieces that, let's say my child is in first grade. And for me, I was an older parent, so I wasn't sure that I wasn't, is this really what it is? I was kept being told it's developmental, it'll just work its way out, but it did not. And so I noticed that you also provide some resources, and I think those would be helpful too, because sometimes we do know early on, but we're just not really sure what to do. So could you talk a little bit about that resource that you also have on Nessie? Because I think that would help a lot of families too.
Yes, I mean, there are quite a few dyslexia screeners are out there now with a lot more research behind them than our screener. So we're more focused on the actual resources. But honestly, I believe that it's more important to get help than to be screened. But if a parent wants more sort of confirmation, then doing something, we've got something called Dyslexia Quest. When the children play, it's called Yeti Mountain. And it's a series of games which looks at key areas. Key areas to identify dyslexia. One would be processing speed. So people with dyslexia often process written and spoken information more slowly. Now, a well-used assessment, I think is even used in Dibble's 8th, by the way, by University of Oregon, is absolutely amazing. It's got 20 years of research behind it, and it's free. It takes 5 minutes to give, and it really does identify dyslexia.
Okay.
So, rapid automatic naming, they call it, where you look at things, letters, sometimes colors, and you have to say them rapidly. People with dyslexia just more slowly, and that's why written and spoken word takes so much longer. So it's got some rapid automated naming. It's got a working memory exercise. Now, working memory is when you are holding information in your head for a very short time, and then you have to work with it, like mental maths, like looking up at the board and copying down. That's, you're holding that information in your head and you're having to work with it. That's always a difficult area for people with dyslexia as well. Phonological difficulties, I talked about that earlier. Being able to identify sounds and chunks of sounds. That's a really key area for dyslexia. So all these are huge warning signs. So we do have a screener. Personally, if you think there's a problem, it's likely to be dyslexia. This whole developmental thing, you're late bloomer, that's a myth. If a teacher tells you that, they don't know what they're talking about. If there's a problem, let's just see if that problem goes away, or if it gets worse, shall we? Mm-hmm. Instead of, the attitude needs to be, okay, we're going to give them a different approach. We're going to try give them this structured, individualized approach right now, because even if they don't have dyslexia, then that's going to help them. But instead, they said, "Oh no, just ignore it for a bit. It'll probably just go away in time." No, it won't. I hear things like borderline dyslexia, dyslexic tendencies, dyslexic traits, or just they'll be a late bloomer, they'll catch up later. These are all warning words. No, that just if you've got dyslexia, you have dyslexia. And it needs addressing immediately. Do not delay. So I personally think if you know there's a problem, if you think there's a problem, there is a problem. Get on and do some OG work.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And in the show notes today, I will actually link to Nessie and your social media accounts and places that people can connect with you and your work. And so I so appreciate you being available today and being available to our audience. Is there any last words of wisdom you would like to share with moms before we wrap up today?
Last words of wisdom.
You've shared so many, so thank you. It's been excellent.
I think it's important that children don't feel ashamed of learning differently. And that's why it's so important to let them develop the things they're good at and for them to understand dyslexia. And it's going to be tough because of the way it's unsupported in schools. But once you leave school, they can bloom and reach for the stars.
Absolutely. Well, Mike, thank you so much for being with us today and taking the time out of your day to be with us. And we will continue to follow you in the amazing work that you're doing. So thank you very much for that as well.
Oh, thank you.
Wow. What did I tell you? It was a great conversation with Mike today. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and you remember that you got this. Enjoy your week, and I'll see you next Monday.